Okay, that intro was weird. I didn't like that intro at all. But either way, we are here to talk some NBA. We're going to talk about some teams that are on a pretty crazy win streak, and I feel like not getting talked about that much. We're also going to talk about some coaches getting fired. We'll tease you with that, and some other players getting injured or coming back from injury. The NBA season is definitely in full swing, and I want to start off warm up jumpers with probably the news everybody's talking about. LeBron James getting his first suspension in 19 years of his career in the NBA. The fight that I at this point, if you're an NBA fan, if you're just a sports fan in general, you've probably seen between Isaiah Stewart and LeBron James, which was just absolutely crazy. Isaiah Stewart, to say the very least, was a tad bit upset.
So, you know how on the podcast I say NBA players are never really actually willing to fight? And the last episode, which thank you guys for bearing with us for a little bit. We know it's been a little over a week, but
Mhm.
we're back on a more regular rotation now, which honestly it works out in the sense that we do have a lot to talk about on this episode. Saying it's jam packed is super lame, so I'm not going to do that. But I always say that NBA players are it's posturing. These guys are WWE guys. They're not going to actually fight. This isn't the 70s anymore. This isn't the 80s anymore. You know, and on top of that, you're on a hardwood court. Like, not really an ideal fighting situation, a
Right.
fighting venue necessarily. Isaiah Stewart was ready to rumble. Like, he was ready to fight.
What was it? What was Rudy Gobert's like? There's a lot of guys that aren't about that. Isaiah Stewart was about that.
No, he was about it. Yeah, no, he was ready. For better or for worse, he was, and thankfully he didn't. Like that's the good thing is that Isaiah Stewart did not actually end up punching anyone. So it's funny because when you start watching the fight, I was like, "Yo, what even happened?" I'm like, "Oh, he probably got
Yeah,
caught by an elbow. Their arms were tangled up. So
it was an elbow, but
yeah,
it was like the people's elbow.
oh
Like,
yeah, you see the elbow. I wouldn't even say it's an elbow necessarily. It was like a real quick fist. Like it wasn't a punch because like he didn't
hmm
lead with his knuckle, but it was like a back fist almost. So he hit him.
hmm
He kind of hit him with the knuckle on the other side, like right below the eye. Because it's funny, like when I saw that, when it kind of gets to a couple seconds in, and he's on the bench, and it's just blood is all over his face. You're like, oh, he got hit like
Well,
that
and
guy.
and and I thought maybe in that first little scuffle, someone threw a punch and started because he wasn't like when he first went after him, you didn't see the blood. And again, the camera shot was kind of far off, so that
Right.
maybe that's why. But you're like, oh, somebody got him. Someone punched him in that little scuffle, and that would be why it escalated. Like I think it was Westbrook who jumped in there in the first scuffle. Which,
Mhm.
by the way, Westbrook doing like the fighting Irish stance towards the end
So
was
I mean, it's
like,
all posturing. That Russ doesn't
oh
want to
yeah,
fight.
no, he doesn't. So, it is what it is. I thought it was fun. People were calling it like Malice at the Palace Part 2. It's like, calm
No,
down.
no,
Okay.
it's
It
not.
wasn't
It wasn't even close. It's not even
right.
remotely in the same ballpark. Um,
So to that, since the fight, Stewart has been suspended 2 games for escalating the on-court altercation. LeBron's got 1 game, but kind of put it in perspective. LeBron's 1 game is about $284,000 in salary, while Stewart's only going to lose like 45,000. Now, again, that is what it is. That's just the pay scale. Um, we already mentioned it. It's LeBron's first suspension in 19 years of his career. And of course, when something like this happens, we go, when do these guys play each other again? There's no cooling off period. They play each other Sunday. It's
yeah,
like, oh, wow.
I think the suspension will cool it off for a little bit. If LeBron truly reached out or tried to reach out to Isaiah Stewart afterwards, after the
Yeah.
game, then I think that'll obviously help cool it off a little bit. They both got punished. I don't think LeBron got off. I mean, that was the
But
big question before yesterday was because we just saw Jokic get suspended. Jokic is the reigning MVP. The question is that standard going to apply to LeBron? I think LeBron
it
should
should.
absolutely, because here's the thing, even if it's not malicious, it still happened, and you still made that dude bleed way more than he should have. Like, at the end of the day, you clocked him in the face with a fist. Do I think it was intentional? I don't know. I think he probably meant to throw an elbow, and at the end of the day, like, kind of just hit him in the wrong place. It doesn't matter. Like, do I think that happens in NBA games? Sure. Guess what? You hurt the kid. He absolutely should have gotten thrown out of the game and deserved a suspension for that. Like this is a worthy thing to get suspended for LeBron James.
I agree.
Isaiah Stewart, excuse me. I got Pistons on my mind. Um, Isaiah Stewart, it's a little tough because like a part of me doesn't want to see him get more than LeBron because he is the victim in this case. But that second charge up looks real bad when he just like ran back down the court, like he was running over
And
screen.
he's just
But I'm
taking
also
people out. Like, yeah.
he was, but the other part of me is also like he didn't punch anyone, he didn't fight
No.
anyone. Like, yeah, he ran and took a lot to get restrained, and he plowed through. And by the way, shout out to Cade Cunningham, being a great teammate. Cade Cunningham went right into the line of fire and was trying to get him out of this for both parts of Isaiah Stewart scuffling.
Mhm.
Essentially,
Mhm.
he was right there in the trenches trying to hold him back. It's a good teammate. It's good leadership you want to see out of your number one pick. Um, but I don't know. It's tough because I think the NBA obviously always, and I said this with Jokic as well, like they're always going to tend to punish the person who retaliates more. And
Of
that's
course.
just what I think this is here with Stewart is because I think of that second wave. Like I think if he hadn't charged that second time, I think it's probably a 1 game suspension, and I think they're probably equal. Like at that point, I think that's fair. I don't think that should be like, am I mad at Isaiah Stewart? Not necessarily, honestly. Like he was bleeding out his face, like it was crazy, and he didn't actually fight anyone. That said, I'm not exactly thrilled about this either. If I'm,
Right.
if I'm running the Pistons and I'm in charge of that, a 2 game suspension seems fine. It's not overkill. If anything, I'd be probably more worried about the fine just for the proportionality to his overall salary. I don't have Isaiah Stewart's contract pulled up in front of me, but he's not a billionaire like LeBron James is.
Right.
It's a greater proportion of that for sure. I don't know. Like, I don't think this is going to be some long-term bad blood here, though. Like, I think I think this is an accident that got caught up in the heat of the moment, but I understand why it escalated. I'll tell you a little something about me. Here's a pet peeve of mine. I hate getting touched on my face. Like, no matter what. Like, it's just one of the like unless you're cutting my hair or
Don't
you're my
touch. Yeah.
girlfriend, like, don't touch me on my face, pretty much. Like, that's just a general rule of thumb for me, even in like, so I get it. Like, if someone were to clock me in my face, even if it wasn't on purpose, I might get rumbling a little bit more. Like, I don't think this is,
Mhm.
it would be a lot different, obviously. Like, if LeBron had fully pulled back and just thrown a punch, then it'd be a different story. Then we'd be looking at like a long, long suspension here, which would be crazy. It would be unprecedented. Um, but well, I don't want to say unprecedented ever, but unprecedented in the recent era in terms of a big
Well,
player going out like that.
and for LeBron, I mean, like we said, this is his first
Yeah, he's
suspension of
never
his
been
career. He's
suspended.
pretty chill dude,
Yeah,
At
like
least it
LeBron's
seems like
had
it on the
moments
court.
on the right. LeBron's had moments on the court, but who hasn't playing how many years that he
Right.
has? And I don't think there are many people who have gone out and said like, "Yo, LeBron is a dirty player. He does all sorts of little stuff." Like that reputation has
Mhm.
never really been there from LeBron. So, it's tough. Again, I think the second charge is what got Stewart that second game. I don't think the upcoming Lakers Pistons game is going to be. I don't think we need to worry about fireworks. I genuinely worry about it more with Miami and Denver than I do with this game. Like I think like this was an accident. That Jokic Morris stuff that was not an accident. Both of those were very intentional. I don't
Well, there's a
think
lot of other
that.
things at play with that one that'll
I think
probably
LeBron tried
escalate
to do.
things too.
Yeah, I think LeBron tried to do a minor thing that ended up being a major thing, and like that doesn't
Yeah.
excuse it. Like that doesn't excuse it at all. Like
No.
that was some bush league from LeBron right there, and he rightfully
Mhm.
is suspended. But again, I don't think we need to worry about a brawl. I said, it's different. Like with hockey, obviously they're tremendously different sports. With hockey, whenever there's two teams with really bad blood who may have just got at it in last games, there were plenty of dust ups, all that stuff. At the beginning of games, you'll often just see the line brawl where they go out right
Mhm.
away. They just all fight for a sec, get it over with, and then just play the game. There's
Mhm.
not really an equivalent of that in basketball, nor can there be. But you almost just kind of wish there could be so they could get it over with and just move on.
They should let them do like they should let them do if it's like a 2-point game. It's like, all right, two people can go out back and fight. Winner gets 2 points added to their team, and then if they win, they go into overtime.
It's crazy too, though. The thing with like, I know the hockey guys obviously have pads on, so it's a little different. Like NBA, you got no
Yeah.
protection essentially. So
Yeah.
that on top of that in the hardwood, but it's still that blows my mind still with hockey, where it's like because even with helmets and shoulder pads and all leg pads and everything else that they have on, you're fighting on ice. Ice isn't
Yeah.
much like ice and hardwood aren't much different here. Like
No. No,
Uh,
and we went to obviously it's not NHL, but the Iceman here in Jacksonville, the Solar Bears there in Orlando. Like I
yeah,
went to a game the other weekend and saw them play, and I mean they fight a lot in that league. So
yeah.
you're like, man, they're just, and some of the hits. I mean, in general, even just in hockey, some of the hits, you're like, "Whew,
The pros are,
dude,
I think, the pros are starting to get away with it or get away from it more because you're
yeah.
realizing like you don't want your skilled guys and your best guys out of your lineup for 5 minutes. Like it's just
Well,
not
and
worth it.
and And to that, in the Iceman League, a lot of it is you're either fast or you're showing that you're tough. So
Right.
that's why that stuff's happening. That's how you make a name for yourself. So we get it, but still kind of craziness. So
Yeah.
it is
No,
what it is.
absolutely.
One of the other things we wanted to do in a warm up thing is a little theme for Thanksgiving, as Thanksgiving's coming up in a few days since we're recording this. So you might either be listening to this after or before. And depending on that is either happy Thanksgiving or happy belated Thanksgiving. Um, our idea was pick a team or two and kind of do things that that team could be thankful for. And this is nothing new. There's a bunch of blogs that'll do this kind of theme, but I feel like it fits with the theme of the times. So my first team that I went with was the Golden State Warriors. Um, in general, I feel like they should be thankful for health, but mainly thankful for Draymond Green, who I feel like a lot of people turned away from last year when they were struggling and didn't. I don't know. They just didn't really like his antics, or were kind of not giving him the credit he deserves. If you look at his stats, he's essentially the same as last year. Um, but more efficient. I'll say that. Like the 3 points up, the field goal percentage is up. It's still about the same amount of points, almost 8 points per game, and kind of doing it everything kind of guy, like we've always said. But a lot of people have been tweeting about his almost like teammate appreciation. Like he's always trying to hold teammates accountable. He's always setting the tone, and I think we're really seeing it again now that they're being successful. I think a lot of you know the blame, not the blame's the wrong word, but a lot of the credit, there it is. A lot of the credit should go towards Draymond Green and his um relentless pursuit of holding teammates accountable and always trying to get the best out of everybody, and really being there and pushing everyone on the Warriors.
Yeah, Dre is the backbone. He's always been.
hmm
I mean, go
But I
back to
feel like,
2015 when they
last year they were kind of like, he's not that efficient. Is it
because his
worth? You know what
offense
I
has
mean? Like I felt
regressed. That's the
right.
biggest thing is his offense has noticeably regressed to the point. I mean, there were games where he'd be, he would score 4 and just 6 points for a week
Yeah,
straight, and you would go, "What is the max contract value for this guy?" The max contract
right.
value, besides coming from the locker room stuff, it comes from the fact that he just anchors that team's entire defensive identity. I mean, Steph Curry is obviously the head. Steph Curry is
Of
the
course.
guy. He's the top three player in the league, arguably number
But he
one
gets
right
the
now.
credit. He obviously gets the credit
Of course he
and will
does.
always get the credit,
But I think everyone who really watches the Warriors knows how important Draymond is and has been. And like, I
Yeah.
mean, again, the offense has definitely regressed. He's a long way from the player who put up, what was it, 32 points in game 7 of the NBA
Yeah.
finals, even though they lost that game. Like, it wasn't because of Draymond Green. Um,
He hasn't averaged double digits in a season since 2017, 2018.
no, but it's
Since
every,
he hasn't averaged, to take it to a Jacksonville thing, he hasn't averaged double digits since the Jags were trying to make it to the play, well, the you know what I mean, the Super Bowl.
yeah, that was 1 year. And
Shout
now
out to the
it'll
Eagle. Shout out to the Eagles.
go Birds, baby. 2017 champs forever. Super Bowl 52. No, they, or yeah, with Draymond has always been the backbone of the team. It's just Draymond is so good at everything else. Like that's the thing. If Ben Simmons kind of leaned into that role, I think he would thrive a lot more. That's another conversation for later. But
Mhm.
Draymond just does everything else so well. He's such a good passer. He has such a high basketball IQ. He plays so well defensively. Like it just feels like he's making the right read. And it is. Like, that obviously like Draymond brings the energy sometimes and sometimes it isn't always what you want. But
Sure.
more often than not, and I think it just goes without saying that every time this Warriors team has been good, he's been a crucial part of it. Like I think it's
Yeah.
easy to blame him when they're bad, but it's like here they are again. Here's Draymond Green shining at everything he does. Like again, Would this work without Steph Curry? Absolutely not. But I don't think it would work without Draymond Green either. Like my hot take with the Warriors dynasty as a whole, like when this whole team got built back in the day, is that I've always kind of thought that Draymond is more important than Clay. I don't want to sound disrespectful to Clay because I think Clay Thompson is like one of the best shooters we've ever seen. I think he's only probably behind Steph. I think he's borderline going to make them. I mean, if he comes back to what he was doing, this team is 15-2 right now. Like, we have to
Hmm.
start talking about them as the favorites to win the whole Western Conference. I mean, we're borderline there anyway, but like,
Hmm.
once Clay gets back, which unfortunately doesn't seem like it'll be till after Christmas. But regardless, like they're doing all this without Clay. But Dre is the guy. He just is so key to them on the defensive side of the ball that I think what he brings and what he enables Steph Curry to do is just so crucial. And I oftentimes kind of judge how people talk about Draymond Green. Like it's a basketball IQ barometer for me, essentially. Like it, because if you look at the box score, you're not going to think Draymond Green is good. But if you watch the
Right.
games, it's undeniable.
Right. I completely agree. And with that, I always go back to the clip where it's like Durant and him, and it looks like they're kind of arguing, but he's more like just like you like he's like, just trying to
Oh yeah,
push
yeah, yeah. The hyping him up.
KD. Yeah, but it always goes back to that in my mind when you think of Draymond. It's like, that's a lot of you don't see the stats. You don't see that stat of him hyping up KD or Curry or, getting the best out of the young guys or teaching something to somebody on the side of the court, like mid game. Like I think that's something that he's obviously doing a ton of. So
Well, and
that's
that's the way
why
it
I
is
put
now.
them
Yeah.
there for that.
Oh, and the vets have been, or the young guys, I should say, they've added a couple vets back in, bringing Iguodala back, getting Otto
Hmm.
Porter on the minimum. But yeah, the young guys, obviously, namely Jordan Poole, but a couple of others as well, have been, a big reason that rotation is solid out. I mean, the Suns. We're going to talk about the Suns after the break, but the Suns have won 13 straight, and the Warriors are still in first place. Like that's pretty ridiculous at 15-2 right now.
Hmm.
I'm trying. Let's see a couple teams that what we can be thankful for. Let's see who else. I'm trying to highlight somebody who's at the top.
I've
Um,
got another one if you want me to go.
yeah, let's just go with another one. Who do you got?
All right, my last one is going to be the Bulls, who made a lot of changes this offseason. And I was going to say they should be thankful in general for Ball and Caruso's defense. I don't know if you saw the clip of Caruso's D the other day where he just locked it down, like just shut it down.
Yeah,
And I think there was a lot of concerns over the defense with Chicago in the past, and they're easily one of the best or better defensive teams in the league. And I think a big part of it is the tone that is set from Caruso and Ball. And I think it shows, LA probably regretting lowballing Caruso a little bit. And we're seeing how big of a impact he can have on a team.
I don't want to make this a Lakers thing, but the thing with the Lakers that kind of it amazes me of the past two seasons is even I mean going back to Kawhi, it's a little different. Obviously, what we know what Kawhi is, but
Sure.
it's always interesting to me because the Lakers won the title 2 years ago now. And they did it with LeBron and Anthony Davis and a bunch of really good role players who bought in. And it seems like ever since then, they've just been third star hunting. And I don't really get why, because they've had a championship formula. Because it feels like that's what they kind of did with Russ here, too. Like they brought in Russ to be the third star besides LeBron and AD. And they just have, I can get wanting to make changes last year, but they just ended up moving on from so many guys who were successful there and who we see now thriving in other places.
Yeah.
Because I'll actually talk about, the team I'll talk about in a second is Washington. But yeah, going back to Chicago, like you said, Caruso's been a big part of that. I mean, the most pleasant thing to see by far is that Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan were working. I mean, I think there were a lot of skeptics,
Yeah.
and DeRozan posted about it on Insta the other day. He's taking his shots right now, which is well deserved.
You
But
should.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
there were genuine defensive concerns there. Like I thought they may have given DeRozan too much money for the fit. But look, this is a team that wanted to surround Zach LaVine with talent. They wanted to finally really make a run at this and kind of make the Bulls relevant again for the first time since probably the D Rose teams. The D Rose, Joakim Noah teams is the last time they were really in the spotlight like that. And yeah, as of recording this episode, they're 12-6. They're a game out of first place in the Eastern Conference. Have had
Hmm.
multiple great wins. It's not like they're just beating on soft teams either. They're here to stay. They're going to be around. And it is. It's good to see them being a factor again. And it's going to be good to see Zach LaVine play meaningful basketball too. That's what they were doing.
I agree.
We saw Atlanta do that with Trae Young last year, where they spent a lot of money to try to get them in, not just into the playoffs, but to be able to be in a situation where they can make a run like Atlanta did. That's what Chicago is trying to do here.
Well well, and to that, we compared the Bulls to Atlanta from last year because of how much money they put into the team and the change that they did in the offseason. I think the difference between the Bulls is we're seeing it right away. I think if I remember correctly, and now I'd have to go check to confirm, but I'm pretty sure the Hawks were not in a great
Oh, they were
position
terrible. They
last year
fired. No, they
as
fired
a
Lloyd
yeah.
Pierce. Yeah, it was
Well, right, but I
horrible.
mean, I'm, like, almost convinced they were, like, they were the 3rd or 4th worst team in the East as of, like, All-Star break.
Yeah,
Or maybe it was
no,
Christmas, but they were not good.
it was like their first 25 games or something like that. They
Yeah,
were way out of the playoff picture. Then they hired Nate
yeah,
McMillan. They started surging. They obviously not quite as dramatic of a bad start this year, but the Hawks have also quietly
right.
won 5 straight. They're starting to climb the rankings again as well. No, the one for
Mhm.
Washington, and it kind of tie. I'm going to do Washington, and it kind of ties in because their GM Tommy Shepard just got an extension. But I think Bradley Beal has been adamant about staying in Washington. And I just think, Tommy Shepard has done a really great job of making it an appealing place to stay. I mean, to get off that John Wall contract, bring in Russell Westbrook, they have a good season last year, get into the playoffs, really end the season strong on a high note. And then, win a couple games against the Sixers and then end up moving on from Westbrook, selling high and going out and getting Kuzma, getting Montrezl Harrell, who are playing great minutes for them. Contavious Caldwell-Pope is there as well, who's been a big factor of their rotation. But they've surrounded Bradley Beal with a good mix of veteran rotation guys. They've got plenty of young talent in there now with Hakamura, namely. He's the one that always stands out to me. And then you've got that one bona fide superstar. Like they just have a lot of flexibility that they haven't had in a while either. And on top of that, they're playing good basketball. They're in fourth as we're recording this. They're 11-6 overall. Um, it's appealing now. Like Washington is suddenly, they're in a position where they could trade for a superstar if somebody comes available. They have good players, or they could just keep riding it out as it is. Like they have reasons to, and as long as Bradley Beal's there, he may be able to convince someone to come with him. So, the vibes are high in Washington, I guess we should say. They're better than they've been in the past couple of seasons, that's without a doubt.
Yeah, I agree, and it's one of those things that I think as a from a fan perspective, nobody really understands why a player would want to stay with a team. I know a lot of people want Lillard and Beal and all those guys to just move on and go to another place and go ring hunt or go to a team that's better. And so, you don't see that as much as players that want to stay, but I think that definitely speaks to the coaching staff and the players saying, I can see where they're trying to go and I believe in this and I don't want to leave. And so, while it's frustrating for some fan bases, it's cool to see.
Well, you always compare Dame and Beal because they've always been, like you
Right.
said, the two guys that have been, it felt like had a chance of leaving those two superstars. But I like, it's kind of the difference between those situations is where with Portland, they've been kind of afraid to shake it up. It's gotten kind of
Sure.
stale at this point. Like they've made minor adjustments, but they haven't really, they've just kind of moved deck chairs around essentially. Give credit to Washington for going out and not being afraid to take a big swing. Trading John Wall, who obviously was a staple of your last run of success with him and
Yeah.
Bradley Beal when they were great together for those couple of years, namely around 2016. And then go out and get Russ, and then not being afraid to sell high on Russ after he gives you your first playoff berth since then, and you guys have a little bit of success there. Like those are the moves that you need to make, and again, I think that's where Washington deserves a lot of credit. They're taking swings, and that's just what you like to see. Got to
Nope.
be,
I
you never can be
completely
afraid
agree.
to reinvent yourself. Welcome, everybody, to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me, as always, my co host, Justin Kuzart.
Just catching our rhythm 5 times in a row. Hashtag we move.
Oh, so is that Trae Young? Is that going back to
Yeah.
the, yeah. I mean, listen, 5 straight for the Hawks. Like you said, I mean, there was never really, I always say 20 game sample size. We're getting close. We're at 18 for the Hawks right now that they played.
We're close to that sample
Um,
size. Yep.
they're going to be back into the playoff position. Like there was never really a scenario for me that Atlanta was going to be out of there. Deandre Hunter being hurt again stinks. Like he's just had. It feels like every time he gets going in Atlanta, he gets hurt again, and so that's pretty unfortunate. Um, they're going to get Okongwu back too at some point. Like he's been missing time to start the year, so that'll boost that rotation for a little bit. He was huge for them in the playoffs last year. So we'll see what
Mhm.
happens. He's another young guy that they're excited about. The Hawks are going to be fine. They're going to be in the playoffs. I couldn't be less worried about that on the panic meter. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we move or something like that. You can move as well. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Stitcher, Google Play Store, Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Music, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and be sure to follow us on our YouTube page. You can find us Drive and Dish NBA on YouTube, and you can watch a video version of the podcast.
And now a word from our sponsors. All right, support for the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. We got a new sponsor here brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They just launched their fourth generation trimmer, the Lawn Mower 4.0. Actually, just you got it there in the box right now. You want to hold that up for the camera real quick?
I haven't opened it yet, but it's right
in
here.
in the package and everything. And shout out to them for sending that to us as well. I have
Yeah.
opened it. It's nice. The blades are there. They're sensitive as you would, hope they would be. But again, this is the 4.0. So, they've obviously, there's been other versions of this. It's
Well,
successful. It's improving on
you
a
were
popular design.
you were alluding to the Wizards and how they're always willing to adapt and change and stuff like that, and that seems like what they're doing every time they bring out a new. They're adapting and changing and getting better each and every time.
Yeah, the fourth generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to the advanced skin safe technology. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code DISH20 at manscaped.com. Again, use the promo code DISH20 at manscaped.com. And hey, the whole site right off, it's Thanksgiving, obviously. We just talked about that. Black Friday is coming up. Cyber Monday is coming up, but exclusively for this upcoming Friday on Black Friday, they are running the sale site wide. Everything is 25% off and you get free
Cool.
shipping. So definitely want to check that out as well.
Yep, and using the promo code DISH20 obviously helps us, supports us, and we appreciate that very much. And hopefully you enjoy the product.
All right, so now in the Eastern Conference, well, I should say we talked a little bit about them in the warm-up jumpers, and now we're going to jump back to the West a little bit. Couple things going on. We'll talk about streaks in a little bit because we're not going to get in depth to it, but the Rockets look like the worst team ever. The Rockets have lost 15 straight games. They're 1 and
Well, they're
16
still.
overall.
Do you think like what I remember because I should remember this from when the Sixers were trying to do it? You think they have the worst record in history at
They
the end of the
might.
season if you had to
The
call it?
the Sixers didn't have it. The worst was well, the
I but
Sixers
they
do
but they
let me
almost
rephrase
did.
that.
Remember?
The Sixers
Yeah.
do have it. They just didn't out the current version of the which is crazy because the year this after the Sixers had the worst streak ever, I think they won the finals like 2 years later. Like they won the finals in
Oh
'67.
wow. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they were running with themselves. The Bobcats actually had the worst percentage ever, but it was the lockout shortened season, and so they didn't
Mm,
have as many losses. Um, but yeah, that Sixers team won. They were 10 and 72. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I the one in they're 1 and 16 right now. Yeah, I think they're going to challenge 10 and 72. This is rough. But we'll get back to that in a little bit. And because I'll kind of look at their schedule and we'll get back on a much better note. Like I said, Phoenix has won 13 straight. But the first thing we do want to talk about is the Sacramento Kings. Luke Walton is officially out as head coach. Alvin Gentry is officially in as interim coach. This is Alvin Gentry's third interim head coaching stint. Every time after he's gotten hired, so that usually bodes well. So there's a there's a chance he's head coach by the end of the season full time or the beginning of next year. But I guess I don't know. This didn't really catch me as a surprise. Sacramento has expectations. They feel like with their young guys, they feel like they want to see them taking steps. Luke Walton's been on the hot seat since last year. So when they're already off to a
Hmm.
disappointing start, and as of right now, not in the playoff picture, like I'm not terribly surprised that they made this move here.
Yeah, Walton, 68 and 93 in his 2 seasons with the Kings. So obviously not the greatest record. You go look at the last few games that they've lost to teams like the Spurs, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, and things like that. And I mean, just in general, the vibe around the Kings, and I feel like the vibe around the Kings in general for the past, I don't know how many years has just kind of been like, well, they're just disappointing, you
Oh,
know,
it's not Luke
and
Walton's fault for all of that. I think a lot of that
I
is well
well, but
beyond Luke Walton.
no, but I think with every passing year, the urgency to get better is heightened, and the room for error is less and less, if that makes sense. Um, and so that's kind of why I alluded to that, where like if you had, I don't know, maybe he would have had a little bit more of a leash with a team that hasn't had what 15 years of playoff drought, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
so I think that's a big part of it. But so to that, like you said, Gentry taking over. I think you said the third time taking over. This is actually his sixth NBA team now. And I saw something interesting. ESPN was reporting that the Kings and Gentry are talking about potential benchmarks of success for the rest of the season that could serve as parameters, for him to keep the job long term. I wonder what those parameters would be. I know if you look at the Kings, they're one of the league's worst defenses. I think they're ranked 26th in efficiency, or that was last year. They were ranked 26th. They're 26th in rebound percentage, 29th in points per game in the paint. Last and second chance points per game. So, and it goes back to the 15-year drought which they've just had. I mean, coach after coach after coach after coach, it's just a turntable of coaches. It's you just keep filtering them through. So
and they don't
I
even have
wonder
a
what those
bad.
parameters would be, though.
Well, yeah, I wonder what they are too, for sure. I mean, it certainly didn't get off to a great start. They just lost to the Sixers
No.
last night without Embiid and without Tobias Harris, so that's not
Yeah.
great. Yeah, they're
No.
25th in defensive rating right now. They're 14th in offensive rating, 22nd in overall net rating. I mean, it's interesting because there's talent on this roster, and that's where I think the expectations part of it is. I mean, Harrison Barnes is having the best year he's had in ages. Like De'Aaron Fox is on this roster. You know, obviously with well, it's because it's a good mix. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Because in terms of the young guys, you got De'Aaron Fox, you got Tyrese Halliburton, you got Davion Mitchell, who you drafted. Obviously Begley's in the doghouse; he's not there. But then in terms of they've got vets between Buddy Hield, who I think we can consider him a vet now. Harrison Barnes is having a
Mhm.
great season. Rashawn Holmes is there. He's a guy who's brought a lot of value in a couple different spots now. Like Sacramento's in position to basically be involved in the trade market. Like they have a lot of guys that, if they decide to just go all in and basically go in the tank for another draft pick again, they have plenty of guys who I think will get. I mean, we saw plenty of contenders going after Buddy this past offseason. I think Harrison Barnes has upped his value a lot. Like I said, I'm not going to say I'm only using Ben Simmons because I don't know who else is super available right now in terms of big players to shake it up. But like the Kings are absolutely the type of team that could put together a package for that. Like if Dame Lillard were again not, I don't think he's going to become available, but like the Kings could certainly be in the conversation in
But
terms of everybody they have. I don't think that's
but
necessarily what they need to do, but I'm also just
right.
they need to kind of evaluate what they have. Like that's the thing is like
Well,
we're on a couple seasons now with the Aaron Fox. Like we want to see how all this starts to put together. Like I want to see my young guys start to step up and win games on their own and get to the playoffs on their own. Um, they're
and
not
I
that
guess
far
that's
out
kind
of
of
it
where
now. That's the thing.
well, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I know you're talking about potentially making trades and doing something like that, but I just find that as a hard sell from maybe Gentry's standpoint, or even the Kings front office standpoint to the fans of, hey, we're going to sell some guys, we're going to get some picks to reload. It's like, man, we've been reloading for 15 years. Why the hell can't we make a playoff run right now?
I mean, do you want a hot take?
Sure.
I think Ben Simmons is better than anybody on that Kings roster right now, except maybe De'Aaron Fox. But I think why would you not trade for
Ooh.
Ben Simmons if you're Sacramento? I get it, but I don't think you get. They haven't really gotten any top end talent like that recently. Like I still think the potential is
Sure.
there, and if you build the roster around him, like that's the situation where I do think he actually can. Like I genuinely think Ben Simmons can thrive in Sacramento. I'm not just saying that because I think they have the type of players that could equally be appealing to the Sixers as well. Like
You're not just saying that because you want a deal done so that we can get some more depth on our team.
well, no, because I think a lot of the guys the Kings would give up would be more of the veteran guys now. Like, I don't think
Sure.
necessarily they'd give up, I don't think they'd give up Halliburton. I don't think they'd give up De'Aaron Fox. Like, I think that to me is appealing when you have Ben Simmons there. Like, I'm way more interested in a Ben Simmons, Tyrese Halliburton, De'Aaron Fox core than I am of what the Kings have right now. Like, that to
Okay.
me has tremendously more upside, no?
I mean, yeah, yes, but I would want to see it first. You know what I mean? Where like, would Ben Simmons, with the same problems the Sixers were having with Ben Simmons, obviously with the scoring and stuff like that, translate to a team? Like, if you have another guy who's just not shooting, how would that affect,
But I also don't
Halliburton and
he also
Fox?
wouldn't have to be the main offensive guy there, though.
I
That's
agree.
my thing is, like,
I
he
agree.
wouldn't have to be that. He can just and he would certainly fix the defense. But back to Luke Walton, I do think that this is a good decision. If the Kings are gonna do this, like, I think they should do it now, do it early because they're not that far out. Like, they're 2 games behind Minnesota or 2.5 games behind Minnesota for 10th right now. They're 3 full back of the Lakers for 9th, so, there's a situation where they could get into the play-in here sooner than later. If Sacramento can't get into the play-in game, like with now them having extended this to 10, like that's the thing about these teams that underachieve or whose young cores haven't gone to certain places. Like I think we're going to see this more with the play-in game, where it's like if you can't get into the playoff play-in game in your own conference,
It's
like be in
over.
that 9 or 10
Yeah.
spot, it's kind of like unless you're really just blatantly tanking, it's kind of like you sort of got to ask
Or
yourself some tough
well,
questions.
and I would say I guess the other outlier to that is what were the injury situation looking like there too? If your team's just
Yeah,
riddled with injuries, then it's like,
absolutely.
all right, but I agree with that. It is if you don't even make the play-in tournament, then I think it is time to take a deep look at your team. But I would bring up like what's Orlando gonna say to itself? Because they don't look like they're gonna make it now. So what do they
Yeah,
say?
but
Oh, we're
Orlando,
just
this is
young and developing.
Yeah, it's the first year of it. I think that's exactly what you say for the like, there are
Hmm.
situations where I don't think it's a fail like, Detroit's another one where it's like, I don't think Detroit's a failure this season if they don't make the playoffs, not if the young guys are playing well.
Sure.
It's the teams that have kind of like whose young guys have been in it a couple years and who, you have real sample size. So, like, Cleveland, for
Like the
example, I think
Kings.
yeah, the
Yeah, the
Kings are
Kings
definitely
and
one.
Cleveland.
I think
Hmm.
Cleveland is one now where you're seeing them take the steps, and we'll get into Colin Sexton later. But I think Cleveland is one where you see them taking the steps, and you're encouraged about that. But to the other token in the East, I'm looking at Indiana, for example, where it's like if you're Indiana and you can't get in the playoff play-in, and you have Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis, and Miles Turner on your roster, you got to start asking yourself some tough questions. Like Harris LeVert is there too. Like these are situations where you shouldn't be missing playing games. Like, though
Yeah.
I do think again with the East, it's gotten a lot better. The other team that asked me that, so I guess so here's 2 examples in the West of kind of what I'm talking about. If Oklahoma City doesn't make the play-in game, I don't think it's a failure. I think,
Sure.
as long as they're right around that mix, they're so bringing in so many young guys right now, and obviously have all zillion of those draft picks for the future. Like they have one
Yeah.
established guy in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a stud. And he's a big reason why they are kind of overachieving a little bit this year. But with them, I don't think it's the end of the world because you're still evaluating what you have, and there's still a lot of pieces who just frankly aren't even there yet. But for San Antonio, for example, like I think San Antonio's in that Sacramento group where, you've had Deontay Murray, you've had Derek White, you've had
Yep.
Keldon Johnson, like you've had all these guys for a couple of years now. And I know LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan are gone, but it's just kind of like, what exactly are you building towards? And that's where I think you start to have those more difficult conversations. Um, we'll see what happens. Like I said, we're starting to hit that
Yeah.
kind of 20 game sample size where you can begin to have takeaways a little bit in the year. We're not just at the beginning and getting our sea legs adjusted
Right.
essentially.
Right. And that's when teams, will have to decide the direction of their team for the season. And to that, from the entire other flip side of it is the Suns that are now on a 13 game win streak.
Yeah, they
At
found their
least
sea
as
legs
of
real quick.
holy moly, dude. Yeah. So a few things that I just wrote down. There's the second highest scoring teams in points per game in the 13 games that they've been winning. They're the most efficient field goal percentage, top 5 in 3-point percentage, top 3 in assists and steals per game. They have 7 guys in double digits. Booker is shooting 40% from 3. Ayton and Chris Paul are averaging double digits. It was worth noting that Kaminsky was filling in when Ayton was out for a little bit. And now Kaminsky's out with the injury, with, I guess they're calling it a stress reaction in his right knee. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound great. But like I said, he was one of the guys in double digits. So there's kind of two angles to this, right? Where you're like, the Suns are on this streak, they're killing it, they're playing really well. I think losing Kaminsky is going to hurt a little bit, but we'll see what kind of bump that that takes. Um, Kaminsky was in their third most used lineup, and it was actually one of their most efficient lineups in terms of plus minus. That lineup actually surprisingly was Chris Paul, Jake Crowder, Kaminsky, Booker, and Bridges. Kaminsky is out or was averaging 10.6 points per game, 54% from field, about 5 rebounds per game this season. So yeah, well, they're gonna miss him, but I don't think that takes away from the fact that the Suns are just cooking right now, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of national coverage about them cooking.
Oh, I think it's because it's the finals hangover thing. I think
Yeah.
they are going to miss Kaminsky. Kaminsky was I mean, he was doing admirable on the fill-in
Hmm.
job when Aiton was missing some time, and then just having really since last year, he's kind of broke out and really found a role with them. And I mean, they're going to miss him. Like I said, those minutes are
Yeah.
important when Aiton's not playing. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in that position. Phoenix was 1-3 as of October 27th and just hasn't lost
Yeah.
since.
Yep.
There's a chance they're 4 games out right now from running the full gauntlet of just the month of November. They have Cleveland tomorrow, they have New
Should get it.
York on Friday, and then
Should get it.
They have Brooklyn on Saturday and Golden State on Tuesday. I
Ooh,
think
those last
Brooklyn.
two.
Yeah, well, and just honestly, all of them. Like they're in the
Yeah.
Garden. Like I could see them losing to New York in the
Hmm.
Garden. Like I think they'll beat Cleveland, and then I think one of those back to backs they'll lose. I don't think they're going to sweep New York and Brooklyn on the road, and then it obviously gets tough at Golden State. It is in Arizona, so that's a little bit of good news there. But yeah, obviously the way Golden State's playing, but that's going to be a great matchup. I mean, the way both of these teams are playing right now. I mean, that's 1-2. I mean, I think the most encouraging thing is again, we worry about, or generally in the past, you see kind of the finals hangover. It's after you lose the finals, can you bounce back? How do you handle the next season? In a Western Conference where nobody has really separated themselves, and there are a lot of questions. I mean, you've got 4 and 10 separated by 2 games right now. And even Utah at 3 is only a game ahead of the Clippers at 4. I think you got to be thrilled if you're Phoenix right now to see you and Golden State just stepping out to this early lead. Like it sure feels like they're setting the pace. And in a conference where we didn't necessarily know who the top dog was going to be, these two teams in particular are coming out and saying, "Yo, we're here, we're ready. Like we're making another run at this."
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were, like you said, in the first 4 games of the season, were like, "Oh boy, maybe we're not going to see it again." And again, that was a quick, too early reaction. Whereas now, like you said, the 20-game sample size that we always talk about is like now we're closer to that. And look, they've gone 13 straight, and they might go 14 or 15, maybe 16, 17 straight, and go undefeated for an entire month, depending on how the games go the next 4. So the Suns are cooking. I was just like, I know you were saying that the hangover. I was just so surprised that I'm like, I feel like because I had my head down a lot last week, just trying to get work stuff done. I feel like I hadn't heard anything about the Suns playing well until we were starting to get ready for the podcast, and I was like, oh wow, they're doing really well. I
I
don't think
think it's
anybody
too.
was going to be surprised, but yeah,
So I think it's 2 major market things. I think one is that the
hmm,
Warriors are doing really well and are still in front of
true,
them. So I think there's a lot of
true.
talk about obviously Steph Curry is going to get that talk no matter what. The other
Hmm.
thing too is I think the Lakers, man. I think the Lakers have just been such a uh, I mean, they've been a failure so far. Like this is not remotely where they expected to be. I think that's been the talk as well. We've been kind of more focused. We've been more focused on them. The more competitive basketball. I said this is the first time in a while that I really feel like the Eastern Conference is better. Like I don't feel like the Eastern Conference has been better than the West in like 20 years, maybe. You've had singular teams that have been able to obviously win the finals. It's not like it's been super skewed to the West for the finals, but the Eastern Conference, we know has been pretty bad at times. The Eastern Conference has got hitters from top to bottom this year. Um, where even with the West, the West just has a couple bad teams too. Though I guess the East
Hmm.
does too. That Magic score last night was, oh god. I mean, the final was 123-92, but I think it was like 72-29 at one point. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Good lord.
That's like yeah, that's not that's what we say is not good.
Yeah, we'll get into we'll go deeper onto Houston a little bit later. But again, they're losing 15 straight. Spoiler alert, they're not falling for me this week, but they may be on infamy watch. We're going to definitely keep an eye on that. But it is time for who's balling, who's fallen, our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. So Just, let's start with you. We got who's balling this week?
Perfect. For me, I'm going to go with Amon Shumpert, who is now a one-time NBA champion and a one-time Dancing with the Stars champion. So congratulations to him.
So, is it cheating to have Iman Shumpert on Dancing with the Stars? Like, I say this every time it's the professional athletes because I feel like they're just, you know, if I get an actor in there and I get Iman Shumpert, like, of course Iman
Sure.
Shumpert's going to smoke them. And on top of that, he's
Sure.
married to Tiana Taylor, who's a
Mhm.
like, besides being an R&B singer, she dances and does all sorts of
We
other. I mean,
saw
she's like a
we
jack of
s-
all trades.
Jeremy and I saw Tiana live, and Amon Shumpert was backstage with us. It was like the most random event I've ever been to, but it was so crazy. Yeah, I looked at it and I'm like, okay, so who do you go up against? And I think the final two. Again, I don't watch Dancing with the Stars. I was kind of surprised at how many people do, based off just people tweeting about it. But you're going up against JoJo Siwa. Like, did you did you think Amon wasn't gonna win? Like, come on.
And he smoked. I only saw like I didn't watch this. I did see the one performance, the Halloween one, I think it was, and he smoked it. Like
Hmm.
he did great. It was awesome.
He's
And like
good.
I'm
Yeah,
good, like good for Iman Shumpert, man. Like
I'm
I'm
happy
not
for
trying
him.
to sound like a hater. Like that's awesome. Good for him. Way to get it
Right.
done.
And
Um
that's no dig at JoJo Siwa. It's just like, like you said, back to the athlete thing. And I know she's very talented herself, but it was just
Tiana
like, I
Taylor
mean,
has like I genuinely like her music.
mhm,
Gonna Love Me from the 7-song EP that came out during the run of Kanye West produced albums is great.
sure.
And she has a song that Iman Shumpert is actually on,
Mm,
called "Wake Up Love." That it's on like my morning good mood type playlist. It's a really just like it's a good song. Play it around your girlfriend; they'll
okay,
like it. Use Manscaped
okay.
products around your girlfriend as well. All right, all right. Balling for me
Dish
this week.
dish 20, dish 20
Yeah,
for
Tish
20%
20 is
off.
the code. Balling for me this week is Miles Bridges. I just feel like we gotta talk about the run that this guy is on. Just absolutely taking the steps or the leap for the Hornets this year. Last game, the main one that brought this is unfortunately in a loss against Atlanta, but he had 35 and 10. Before that, 17 and 10, 14 and 6, 22 and 8. 24 and 4. Like Miles Bridges has just been the guy. And mind you, the Hornets have won 5 of their last 6, actually 6 of their last 7 overall. They're 11 and 8 right now. Miles Bridges has broken out. Like he's always been a great athlete. We know he's been a high flyer. He's good for 3, 4 ridiculous poster dunks that make the Hornets commentator absolutely lose his mind and just make up phrases that I've ever heard before. Um, but yeah, Miles Bridges is breaking out. He's got a real early case, strong case for the MIP race, and I think he's probably in the lead. And now, if as long as it holds up, it's going to be a pretty tough one to beat, honestly.
He was, one of the players. There he is. He's probably in the top 20 for fantasy points in NBA right now.
Yeah,
Just ahead Jimmy Butler, actually, if you want to put it in for reference. But he was one of the players I targeted in our league that I was going to try to trade for because my theory was his name was still kind of newish and he was in the top 10 at that point for fantasy scorers. And I was like, maybe I don't remember who has him on our in our league, but I was like, maybe this person doesn't know who he is. And like, I'll throw him a trade out there. They'd be down for that. Didn't do it. But I also selfishly bring up fantasy because my team is scoring the highest points per game in our entire league.
I'm really happy for
Mm.
Miles Bridges, and I am. I thought he slipped, or I thought he got drafted, and because he slipped really far in our
He
league, and
did.
I had
He
him
did.
bookmarked,
Mhm.
and I just didn't see him. And so I was like, okay. And I drafted Kelly Olynyk literally one pick before him, and I want to die.
Oh.
I actually want
Oh,
to die. And like Olynyk was
dude.
playing fine before he got hurt, but like Miles Bridges is given like 40 fantasy points. All right. Anyway,
Yeah,
moving on.
no,
Who's
he's
fallen? Who's
cooking.
fallen this week
Oh,
besides me?
your fantasy. No.
My fantasy
um,
team. Hey, we won last week. We're fine. I'm like 4-1. I think we're all right. We're doing
Dude,
okay.
your record is better than mine. We're in the same division, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but you
Yeah,
and
yeah,
me
yeah.
are top 1 and 2. And the only reason I'm behind you in my mind is because I faltered right off the beginning and I picked some players that I liked instead of being unbiased and going with the players that are going to score more points. And so since I have done that, we are back on top and scoring the highest total points this season. I'm almost at 6,000 points from my understanding. So
Hey, man, the bigger the tree,
we're
the harder the
cooking.
fall.
We are cooking right along here. Um,
Sharpening my axe.
so my fallen, I'm actually trying to pull up the image that I'm going to try to share here. But reactions to this photo that were posted, J.R.
I'm so
Smith
excited.
says, J.R. Smith says, man, hell nah. Boogie Cousin goes, come on, bro. Shit's getting out of hand. Isaiah Thomas goes, come on, killer. This one ain't it. Anthony Davis goes, you're out of line, sir. And with that, oh, come on. I hope I can get this in time. And with that, I would like to share Kyle Kuzma's Instagram from the other day. If I can get it to pull up. Come on
So
now.
we
There it
got it.
is.
Come on. Yeah. Dude,
What
I'm
is
telling you,
that?
it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible.
Oof.
Like, what are the sleeves? Where is his arm? Like, that's where I'm kind of like, where is his
You
arms
know
right
what's
now?
you know what's worse is my first thought when I saw this was, what if he fell? Like he wouldn't be able to brace his fall. Like what if he tripped?
I just appreciate that every NBA player can just literally walk in and wear like I swear they're just in a giant dare where it's like who's gonna get away with just wearing the most ridiculous thing we can before it just goes too far and we collectively draw the line. This is incredible. NBA Paint did a version of this where I forget how many retweets it took, but they would just keep every like it got, they would keep extending the sweater to the point where the sweater has just
Yes.
now taken over an entire city and they have like helicopters overtaking it. Um, I'm also concerned how much that sweater costs. I looked it up.
Yeah.
It's like $1,900 or something like
I
that.
just I it
Um,
I have so many questions. Like, how thin is those little spots in between the design? It looks really thin, and so it also looks like it's about to fall off his shoulders. So I just have so many questions, and it does not look very comfortable. It you don't even see his
oh, no, see, it
hands. So
looks comfortable. See, I disagree there. It really looks comfortable. Like I get the
you
cozy
think?
boys vibe. I'm all about because if I was an NBA player, that's what I'd be doing all the time. I'd just be wearing like hoodies and sweatshirts
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So hang on. It is $1,650. It is
Oh
a
my!
Raph Simmons oversized sleeve virgin wool jumper.
Wow.
It goes for $1,659. I don't know if they'll be having a Black Friday sale like Manscaped, but you may be able to chop a couple dollars off it.
I just that is aggressive. So there you go. And then LeBron also got in the comments and said, "Ain't no way you effing wore that. Pressing the like button because this is outrageous."
That's what I mean. Well, that's where I'm at. Like I'm pressing the like button because it's outrageous. Like I don't
Yeah.
really know what else to say here right now. Or fallen for me. Oh man, I should have had you go second because I think that Kuzma pick is so funny. Like it's so damn funny. And like Kuzma's had like 6 or 7 just outrageous outfits. That one is
Yeah.
just incredible. Um,
Yeah.
Fallen for me is on a somber note is Colin Sexton, who we talked about last episode, torn meniscus, and
Yeah.
now unfortunately we find out is going to be out the rest of the year. Bummer for 2 reasons. Obviously, Cleveland off to a great start, and he was a big reason for that. So now Cleveland is going to have to go on without one of their young guys. The other thing too is for better or for worse, he was brought up in all these trade conversations, and you kind of wanted to just continue to evaluate him. I mean, this is a guy who scored 24 points a game essentially on a team that had zero spacing. And now here he is on a
Yeah.
team that has suddenly much more spacing. It stinks that you're not going to get to evaluate that fit. And I think that's really disappointing. Obviously, best of luck to Colin. We'll hopefully see him again next year. But, definitely an early blow for Cleveland that we're not too happy about.
Yeah, agreed. And if you want to see, pretty much our whole thoughts on that whole situation in general, other than us thinking that maybe he came back at some point during the season, we talked about that pretty in depth on our last episode for sure.
Yeah, it's just like when you see meniscus, you just usually assume that people are coming back, that you
Well, and
get them back.
they
That
and they were convinced that it wasn't going to need surgery, so that was the big part of it too. Where they're like, "Well, if it doesn't need surgery, he might be back before the end of the season, and if they're making a playoff run, then we
yeah.
thought there could be some room there." So,
So we
oh
got
well.
kind of got to end the show on a double dose of injuries, one good, one bad. We'll start the bad, I guess, and just keep getting them out of the way. And that's for Denver. Michael Porter Jr. with a nerve injury in his back. Nothing final yet, so I guess there is a bit of optimism there that we haven't seen what's happening. But Michael Porter Jr. has been out of the lineup, and now there's a report saying that he could miss the rest of the year. Denver's lost four straight going into this. This is already a team down Jamal Murray. Um, I think it goes without saying that when healthy, this could have been the best team in the league. But Michael Porter Jr., who in Jamal Murray's absence was going to have to take on a large portion of the load to basically be the Robin and Nikola Jokic's Batman. And Jokic can only do so much. We saw that last year in the second round against Phoenix, and I think now you're in an even more bleak situation. I don't want to say like Nikola Jokic is there. I don't want to say they're in danger of missing the playoffs, but in a competitive conference, they're at 8 right now. And again, we said the gap between 4 and 10 is not really that far apart, but
Right.
this could get ugly fast if they don't have MPJ in the lineup.
Well, you know, obviously, from a on the court perspective, they're gonna miss him, and I would even take it to an off the court perspective at this point. I mean, he's 23. If he needs another back surgery, that's already 3 back surgeries that you've had, you know, I think there's a level of, like, you gotta take a deep look and see what kinda is going on there, you know what I mean? And,
Oh, it's already done.
obviously oh, they did the surgery for him again?
Well, no, no, no. I'm saying they maxed him. Like deep look. I was like, they already gave him a
No,
max
no, 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 no,
contract.
no, 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 no. I'm saying from Porter's perspective, like, okay, you have 3 back surgeries by 23, and I'm not saying give up the game, but, if this is a thing, that I saw that league sources were saying he's seeking other options on how to treat it. Um, the Nuggets are being very vague about the specifics of the injury and what it is. So if it is something that's in relation to the other surgeries, it's like, okay, well, something's at some point you got to be like, look, man, this ain't it, And I'm not saying give up basketball or anything like that, but there is a level of looking at a 23-year-old who may potentially have had 3 back surgeries in the past few years.
Well, yeah, this is the concern. Like this is the sole reason he
Mhm.
slipped. I mean,
Yeah,
when Michael Porter Jr. was, I mean, and granted, he did get off to a bit of a slow start this year. I think he was shooting like 20% from beyond the arc. But
yeah,
I mean, this is the guy. Like it was the fit. He fits so seamlessly with Jamal Murray and with Jokic. And then you go out and get a guy like Aaron Gordon, and you have Will Barton, and they're just that run it down the line. Like this team is just so deep. The only reason, like, if Michael Porter Jr. had no injury risk, he'd have arguably gone won that draft. Like he's that
I
good.
think he was. They were saying he was going to go number 1 until the injuries or
At
the
the
injury
worst, he was
concerns.
top 3, but it's just I mean, it was the knee injury, and now it's 2 back
Mhm.
injuries. I mean, this is a guy who already missed his entire rookie year, and it's just not what you wanna hear. Like we said, he's still getting
Of course.
evaluated. There are other options. It's not a guarantee, but you just hope Michael Porter Jr. goes the Joel Embiid, the Steph Curry route, where you deal with these injuries early on. It costs you time, but you end up being able to play a significant
Yeah.
amount of NBA basketball. Where and not the Greg Oden, the Brandon Roy, that
Sure.
sort of
Yeah.
route because he is eminently talented. Like that's what's the shame about all. And now for Denver, obviously the rest of the season. I mean, you could get Murray back at the end of the year, but if you're without Porter Jr. and you're still adjusted him back to injury, I think
Yeah.
it would be kind of foolish to think that they were going to go much further. And now I mean they've even had missed Jokic a couple of games here and there, and I think they're at the point where I mean you've got Aaron Gordon essentially as your number one, Aaron Gordon and Will Barton. Um, so it's not great. It's extremely disappointing for Denver. Um, they're not going to just totally plummet. I'm not suggesting they're going to, go off the cliff here, but you hope you can get them back. That's just basically, we'll see what happens. But that early report is not good. On the
Yeah.
other side of the coin, Jaylen Brown is back after 8 games for Boston. He's returned to the lineup. Boston has won 3 straight. They're at 6, 10, and 8 in the Eastern Conference right now. And for as bad as it feels like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like people were really panicking. And I mean, well, I guess we all were when the report comes out that they've had a players only meeting. A couple
Yeah.
of games into the season. It's kind of like, what is going on here? What are we doing? But they're starting to figure it out. They got a lot better defensively. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing is they're all the way up to 6th in defensive rating right now. The offense is kind of they're only around 17. But Dennis Schroeder is starting to settle into his role a little bit. He's up to 18 points a game.
Did you see Boston trolling
I did. Yeah, I
the
did.
Lakers?
Was it was like it was dead. They were interviewing Dennis. So I appreciate the double entendre, obviously, because Schroeder was on the Lakers last year. But then just so y'all really paying Russ 44 million. I didn't think it was real. It was so flagrant that I didn't think it was
Yeah,
real.
I
Um,
thought it was fake too.
I'm glad the rivalry remains strong. But no, I mean they're getting Al Horford and Robert Williams have really done a lot better for them recently in the interior. I mean, Horford is again playing just excellent basketball. Looks like he's much more comfortable in his role back there. Um, and I think like we said, the key to that defense is there. There was always going to be the adjustment as well with Udoka. Like just anytime you bring in a new head coach, it's gonna take time to settle in a little bit. Jason Tatum has kind of struggled to start the year. You imagine that starts to come back to earth a little, or come back a bit more to reality. I don't expect him to do this all season long, but the Celtics are looking more like the team that we thought they
Mhm.
were, not the train wreck that they were at the beginning of the season. So
Yeah, and I mean, Jaylen Brown coming back and dropping 19 points in 23 minutes over the Houston Rockets, I think is fine. I know they said that he was trying to push to come back earlier against the Hawks or
well, that's a
Lakers, and
perfect ramp up game. Listen, the Houston's a perfect ramp up game. The way it's going there right
yeah,
now, it's like the equivalent of playing a minor league team.
yeah, you might as well and I think the big concern was like why rush Jalen back to play the Hawks or the Lakers when you can take some more days and make sure you're back and play against the Rockets, who in theory they should beat it pretty easily and did beat pretty decently. And so, I think that was he's back. He's gonna get his feet under him, and we'll see where it goes. And hopefully the Celtics continue to get the ball rolling like it seems like they have been.
So Houston's only win of the season was against Oklahoma City before we get out of here. It was the second game of the season. Um, they've honestly had a fairly difficult schedule.
Mm,
Um, I'm looking at their next 5. They've got Chicago, probably a loss. They've got Charlotte, probably a loss. But then they got 3 winnable games there because they got a back to back with OKC. So you could split that. Like you got a home and home.
mhm.
And then they've got Orlando at home. And then they've got New Orleans at home. So honestly, like they could get a couple there. So that maybe is where, that's a situation where you can start to pile some wins to avoid infamy. But yeah, they're gonna give it a run. Um,
Do you think by the next time we record this podcast, they have 2 wins?
if it's on Saturday, no, because if we record on Saturday morning, then they will have only played Chicago, and I don't think they're beating Chicago. They'll play Charlotte that night,
Mm,
but I don't think they're beating Charlotte either. If we record on Sunday, the answer is still no. If we record on Monday, maybe because they have Oklahoma City. If we record on Tuesday, it just depends what happens with that OKC game. But there is a
yeah.
chance that
Okay.
we record next week and they may not have 2 wins. And they, by the time, I don't know. But there's also a scenario where I could see them being at 3 or 4 by the time we record, not the next episode, but the one after. So that schedule is a little
Okay.
soft coming up. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. We appreciate you guys. As always, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Stitcher, Spreaker, Player FM, TuneIn, Google Play Store, Amazon Music, Spotify, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
And be sure to use our Manscaped code DISH20 for 20% off. And you can find us on YouTube. Just search Drive and Dish NBA on YouTube, and we'll be there with the video version.